Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Oh my gosh, Luna is panting so loud. I just took her outside to play and now she is trying to cool down. So I forgot to film my monthly roundup video. Oh, you're coming closer to me? Hi, honey bunny. So I thought I would just combine February and March and show you guys all of the books that I have read over the past 2 months. I'm just going to be talking about them in the order that I read them. The first book I read in February was A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and this is the second book to the From Blood and Ash series. I've been reading one book a month from that specific series, and I enjoyed this one. It wasn't my favorite that I had read of the series so far. I actually felt like the dynamic between Poppy and Castile, the two main characters, was really annoying. They had a lot of miscommunication, but as a whole, I did still really like the storyline, and also the ending made up for all of it. Like, the ending was so phenomenal, and usually I feel like the endings of books are kind of letdowns, but this ending was so good that it completely made up for any of like the annoyances that I felt while reading this book. I think I gave this book 4 stars. If you are a fan of A Court of Thorns and Roses, then I would highly recommend this series as a whole for you. The next book I read is called The Midnight Library, and I gave this book 4 stars just because the concept of it was so cool, but I did find it a little slow. In this book, the main character, Nora, is in this Twilight Zone type of place between life and death, where she goes to the Midnight Library, and she can select different books from the library and see how her life would have played out if she had made different choices. So this book does get a little philosophical, and it talks about how if you make one small change in your life, it can really drastically change the rest of your life. I wrote in my Goodreads review that my biggest takeaway from this book was the theme that good and bad things will happen in any life choices that you make, but life is always a beautiful roller coaster of ups and downs. The next book I read was called If He Had Been With Me, and I had very high expectations for this book just because it went viral on TikTok and people were posting videos of themselves bawling, like from how emotional they were from this book, just in tears. This book absolutely gutted them, so I was thinking that this book would do the same for me, and it just did not. It did not live up to the hype for me. I think I gave it 3 stars. I found the book to be really monotone, which that didn't necessarily bother me. I don't know, the story just completely fell flat for me. This book is about Autumn and Finn. Autumn is the main character, and she is very clearly in love with Finn. They're childhood friends to, I guess, lovers at the end of high school, but the thing is, Finn dies, and that's not even me giving away a spoiler. You find out on the second page of the book that Finn dies, and then it goes back leading up to his death, so you can see their friendship blossom and whatnot. So the whole time you're anticipating his death, and then when it finally happens, I feel like it's just kind of meh, because you already knew it was going to happen, so it didn't hit me like I really thought that it would. There is going to be a second book that is from Finn's point of view that's coming out, I think, this October, and I do plan on still reading it. After that, I read a dark romance duet. This was my first time ever reading dark romance, and apparently I jumped in and read like the darkest of the dark romance that you could possibly get, but I absolutely devoured these books. I could hardly put them down. The first one is called Haunting Adeline, and the second one is called Hunting Adeline. I will say though, before you even think of picking up these books, definitely check the trigger warnings for each one. They were dark. These books questioned my morals. There were certain scenes that I had to put the book down, like it was really hard to read, but also it was very eye-opening, and just the writing was phenomenal. The storyline was great. The character arcs were wonderful, and I don't know, these books, they're addictive. Like, they're so good. Long story short, the main characters are Zaid and Addie. Zaid is Addie's stalker, and Addie ends up falling in love with him. And then obviously a bunch of other stuff happens, but I would not recommend this book for anyone under the age of 21, honestly, because I think you need to have the mental maturity to know that this is fiction, to know that this is just a book, and that just because you can enjoy reading about these things in this dark romance doesn't mean that you would actually want those things to happen in your own life, or that you condone them happening in the real world. But what I will say is I rated both of these books 5 stars. Like, if I could give them 10 stars, I would. These are the most phenomenal books that I have ever read, and months later, I am still thinking about the main characters in my head. Like, that's how good this book was. Okay, moving on to March. The first book I read was called Killjoy, and this is a prequel to the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder mystery series. I loved those books. I read them a few years ago. They're young adult mystery, so I would say anyone over the age of probably 14 could read them and really enjoy them. The story is about this girl, Pip, Pip, and she starts a podcast for her senior project that's called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. And in her podcast, she tries to solve the mystery of how someone in her town died a few years ago. The police think that they got the right person, but Pip does not, so she explores all of that. And this book, Killjoy, is a prequel to that. It's about her going to this party and they have this mystery theme going on. It's almost like the game of Clue, but in real life, and obviously no one really got hurt, but it's just the party theme. And at the party that night is where she gets her idea for her podcast and for her senior project. So this book was really good. I think I rated it 4 stars. I read it, I think, in one night because it's only around 100, maybe 150 pages. So if you are looking for a super quick, easy to read thriller prequel, then I would highly recommend this one because it will lead you into the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. After that, I read the book Lone Women. This was one of my book of the month picks, and let me tell you, I have never read a book like this before. It's about this lady named Adelaide, and that's her on the cover right here, and she moves from California to Montana, and I specifically really wanted to read this book because it was set in Montana and I was traveling to Montana around the time. But I believe this book was set, it was like a really long time ago, 1915. Yeah, it was set in 1915. She carries around this trunk with her, this magical trunk that when she opens it, people around her die or they go missing. This was my first time reading a historical fiction horror type of book, and it reminds me a lot of, if you enjoy Jordan Peele movies, then I would highly recommend this book to you because it very much gave the same vibes as those movies. After Lone Woman, I read the book Satan's Affair, and this book is the prequel to Haunting Adeline. So technically I was supposed to read this first, but I did not. In this book, you follow one of the characters named Sibby, and she has had a very rough childhood. She grew up in a cult that she escaped from, and it's about how she lives in the walls of this dollhouse of this traveling Halloween fair, and she can smell the rot in people. So like if you are a really bad person, like a very, very, very bad person, she can sense that and she can smell that, and then she takes matters into her own hands and she unalives you. This book was very gory and there was a lot of spice to it, so I would say that no one under the age of 18 should read this book. There were a lot of sex scenes, there were a lot of gory scenes. It very much felt like watching a rated R horror movie, but in a book. So if that's what you're into, then I highly recommend it. After that, I decided that I needed to read something that was a little bit lighter, so I read Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. And if you guys watched my annotation vlog, this is the book that I read and annotated for my best friend Tiffany. I did really enjoy this one. It was a rom-com type book that was set on a winery, and I thought it was really cute. I think I gave this book 3.5 stars just because rom-coms are not my typical type of book. I like more action-based books, but I thought it was really cute. It was a lighthearted read, kind of like a palate cleanser. And I've also heard that this was not Tessa Bailey's best work, and since I did still enjoy the story, I definitely want to pick up more of her books to read. After that, I read A Crown of Gilded Bones. This is the 3rd book in the From Blood and Ash series, and this one was the best one that I have read so far in that series, and that is all I'm going to say. I rated this 5 stars. It was incredible from start to finish. There was action, there was romance, there was betrayal, there was, I don't know, just all of it. Like anything that I would want in a fantasy book was in this 3rd book, so I have pretty high expectations going into the 4th book of the series. And then I decided to read a quick thriller book. I read The Housemaid's Secret. I thought this book was okay. It was really entertaining. The characters were ridiculous from start to finish, but I think that's just part of it, like having those really dramatic characters that make the book more fun to read. This was the 2nd book of the series. The first one is called The Housemaid, and then this one's called The Housemaid's Secret, written by Frida McFadden. She writes a lot of really, really good thrillers, so if you are looking for quick, easy to read thrillers, I would highly recommend her as an author. I don't remember what I rated this book, but I did enjoy it and I read it pretty quickly. The next book that I read is called Wayward. This was a 2nd book of the month pick for me, and I did really enjoy this one. I have never read anything like this before. It's about the Waywards, who are a family, but it's all about the women of the family, and it crosses different timelines. So I think like the 1600s, the 1900s, and then modern day. And it's really cool because because every woman in the family is very connected to nature. I wouldn't say that they're witches because I don't think that's exactly it, but they're just very connected to nature, and they can have powers through nature and through the animals and insects, and it's just about how they navigate the different struggles that they're having in their lives. And I don't know, just the way that the stories intertwined with each other was really fascinating, and I found this book just really interesting from start to finish. It was a little slow in the middle, but then towards the end, I want to say the last like 50 to 100 pages, everything just really started to tie together really well, and I definitely enjoyed this book, and I gave it 4 stars. The last book that I have to talk to you guys about is called Hooked. I started this one at the end of March, and I've actually already finished it now that we're into April, so I wanted to still include it in this video. But essentially, it's part of the Never After series, and what the author did is she took Disney villains and she gives them dark romance books and with happy endings. So I thought that was just a really, really cool concept, and the first book follows Hook, except he's not really Captain Hook. His name is James Hook in the book, and then his love interest is Wendy, and it's just really cool because it's a dark romance, so it's super interesting, like keeps you on your toes the entire time that you're reading it. It's really intense. There's a lot of action that goes on, but all of the characters came from the Disney movie. Like there's Peter, Smee, James Hook, Wendy, and James and his boys are called the Lost Boys, and he owns this boat that's called the Tiger Lily. So I don't know, it all just is like really cool to read about, and it's a fractured fairy tale, so that was really fun. And since I'm finished with that book, I'll just talk about it now. I gave that book 4 stars and would also highly recommend if you are interested in a dark romance. So that is going to conclude this video. I have some really exciting books that I am looking forward to reading in April and talking to you guys about. If you have read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them in the comment section below. Also, if you guys want to follow me on my Goodreads account, I will link that below because I post up-to-date statuses of what I am reading, my book reviews, and whatnot. So thank you again so much for being here and for watching this video. I hope that you're having a fabulous day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.